Yes, yes.
Yes, Manju, you can.
Okay. So instead of maybe I starting, anyone who attended the last session, would you maybe just want to share a quick recollection, what you recollect from what we discussed last time? In 1 or 2 minutes. That way we can also go forward with the remaining summary if something is missed out. Anyone would like to attempt? Key points that you recollect.
No, can you show that concept?
Not me, Manju.
Okay. Or maybe in the interest of time, no, given that we just do this. Okay, you want to say, yeah, go ahead, Ravi.
No. I didn't want to waste others' time by attempting to do it. So please do it.
Cool. Let me do it then. No problem. I'll take a few minutes to quickly do the recollect, and then we can move forward. Okay. So, folks, this session's attempt was to understand the steps that Buddha, more than Buddha, Gautama, the person he took in his spiritual journey. So this has the way I have approached this is by keeping aside all the miracles or all the glorification that people do, and just focus on the meditation or the meditator aspect of Buddha. And for this, I have referred these 3 books. And a huge thanks to first Analayo for creating 2 of these books. One of the books from Analayo we had used for the session on Satipatthana by Ravi earlier. So we had discussed this specific discourse, which Buddha called as the direct path to realization. We had discussed this Satipatthana in detail earlier. I continued to use this book as one of the reference points, but the primary book for this discussion was another book by Analayo called Meditator's Life of the Buddha. And here his focus was the starting of the Gautama's journey to figure out how to overcome sorrow, or how to overcome the 3 primary challenges of life: old age, disease, and sickness. Old age, disease, and death. And of course, the resultant of that is birth. So this Meditator's Life of the Buddha, Analayo nicely captures his journey stepwise. So we use that book. And the other book that we also used was this Jataka Stories of the Buddha's former births by Kowal and Chalmers. It's actually a group of some 6 professors from Europe who had created this book in 1895. And they had created this book using the Pali language, early Buddhist materials, and they had basically translated it. Okay, and this book was digitized by Microsoft, thanks to their attempt to digitize some of these very treasure books across various aspects of life. And I found this book, and I also use this Jataka Stories of the Buddha to understand and create this overall summary. Okay, so these 3 books helped me in creating a summary which kind of shows Buddha's or the Gautama's journey, how he ended up becoming Buddha. Rather, see, Buddha, one thing to remember, it is not a person, it is a state of awareness that we end up reaching when one becomes or one reaches nirvana or enlightenment. So this is a journey of Gautama to become that, right? So our interest and our focus of this journey would go something like this: starts from his motivation, and the way this whole journey started off for Gautama was based on the strong foundation of moral conduct and fearlessness, and then goes to his attempts to develop concentration. And ideally, if he had a proper guide, he would have gone forward directly towards awakening path discovery or awakening path steps, which is nothing but Satipatthana. But since he had to do many experiments to reach this state, he undertakes few experiments which are kind of a detour. for any of us who would like to go through in the footsteps of Buddha. So at least for Gautama, he took a detour and went through these 3 steps of extreme asceticism. First one being forceful control of mind, second one being breath control, third one being fasting. And after going through them, he realized they don't help, at least in his goal to figure out how to overcome the sorrow or the how to make himself at peace. So then finally he kind of gets an idea of what could be the right steps to take for the awakening, and then with a strong determination he goes forward, practicing in those steps. So when he does, again, Gautama was not the first Buddha who reached awakening, and he is not going to be the last Buddha also. So therefore, some of the other Buddhas or some of the other people who reached Buddhahood or the awakening, when they went through these steps, all of them definitely reached this higher knowledge number 3, which is removal of the influxes in terms of sensuality, existence, and ignorance. But for Gautama, he also ended up getting a couple of additional knowledges or higher knowledges as they are called. One is the recollection of past lives, another is called the divine eye. So and finally, when he also gained this higher knowledge, which is the third higher knowledge, removal of the influxes, he ended up hitting the awakening state, which in Buddhism or Buddha also calls it as the holy life. And from there, there is a lot of documentation which is available, including in Analaya's book also, regarding how he actually lived his life subsequently, and how he faced his old age, disease, and death. Also is pretty much available as the material until all the way up to his passing away once forever. So this journey is what we will discuss. But for us, at least in my intention was all the way up to this awakening was my primary intention, because I felt all of us, since we are all in our respective spiritual journeys, our attempt is to see what kind of learnings we can take from Gautama's experiments and see what of those we can potentially apply to make our own journey smoother and more fruitful for us, right? So from that viewpoint, what I had done is we started discussing in the last session this overview, plus we discussed about his primary motivation. So I have this third view where I have a bit more detailed points that I have captured as the key points to understand in each of these steps. So we looked at in the last session his primary motivation, which was his luxurious upbringing, probably helped him in this current life. Again, we also discussed that before Buddha took this Gautama's life, he had thousands of life earlier, which he got to see for himself during or just before he awakened. So now in this current life, his luxurious upbringing helped him to become very strongly motivated to overcome these basic predicaments of human existence: old age, disease, and death. So now, which is what put him on a noble quest, as Buddhism calls it. And the noble quest is nothing but this specific question. That is, what is the way to achieve unsurpassed escape from bondage of birth, old age, sickness, death, sorrow, and impurity? Or in other words, what is the way to reach Nibbana? That was his noble quest. And to go on this noble quest, he actually departed in daylight and not in night, as some of these glorified texts call out. At least that is what the early Buddhism texts say, including what Analayo says. There is, as per the discourses from Buddha, it was clear that when he was going, his family members became sad, and when he shaved his head, it caused some pain to them, but he still went ahead because he had to do it. That's what happened. And then his moral conduct and fearlessness foundation is something called as a Shila. And basically the key point there is one should lead a life which is free from regret, be it bodily, be it verbally, or be it mentally. So that is the way to lead a life. And that foundation is what helps in going ahead with remaining steps. Is something Gautama probably had the advantage, and later Buddha also keeps calling up in his discourses. Okay, and with, of course, there are a couple of other points, but that is the primary point. Free from regret or being fearless in any action when you are doing something with purity. So, and then we also started discussing in terms of this concentration, his attempts to develop concentration, where we understood he first goes to a couple of teachers. He first actually goes to a teacher called Alara Kalama. There he first learns his teacher's attainments, which are called as sphere of boundless space and sphere of boundless consciousness. And both these attainments helps him only to an extent, but doesn't take him to the answer for or the solution for his noble quest. And then even though his teacher offers him to be his co-teacher, he politely refuses and continues his search and goes to one more teacher, Uddaka Ramaputta, and again through him learns two more attainments, which is called as sphere of nothingness and sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. Again, in fact, his own teacher Uddaka had not yet realized this fourth attainment. Only Uddaka's father had reached, and Uddaka was in that journey, but Gautama overtakes Uddaka and actually achieves both in a very short time. And in spite of that, he realizes this is also not helping. And I think this is where we had kind of stopped last time, if I recollect correctly. Right? So let me pause. So this is the brief summary what we had discussed. And anyone would like to add any further comment or a question before we move forward?
Nothing much.
Okay, perfect. So then today let's discuss a little further about his detour experiments, which gave him results, but the results were not conducive to achieving his initial or the goal, but still they kind of helped him to know what not to be done, right? So this is where, so after going through these two teachers, Alara Kalama and Uddaka Ramaputta, and after attaining these four immaterial attainments, what Buddha realized is, at least he thought, is that these practices, whatever this Alara Kalama and Uddaka Ramaputta were teaching their students, they were not extreme practices. They were kind of comfortable practices as per Buddha's or as per the common understanding. So now Buddha or the Gautama thought these practices is not going to take him towards happiness. So this is where he felt happiness is not to be reached through happiness. Rather, happiness has to be reached through pain, is the conclusion Gautama came to. And therefore, and he was also influenced by some of these sects, like Jainism sect, where the practitioners of Jainism were practicing some extreme austerity. So Gautama thought, okay, I should try out some extreme practices to really hit this noble goal, and therefore he decided to embark on some of those extreme practices. Now the key point here is this journey of Gautama when he left his home on a noble quest, and the time he attains awakening is a journey of about 6 years. And in that, probably he spent, I don't know exactly how much time he spent with these two teachers, but they were definitely short, like few months, maybe a year at most. So between these two teachers, maybe he might have spent a couple of years. And then he realized I should go on some extreme asceticism practices. And he starts with first, he thinks that he will start with forceful control of mind. Because in the earlier attainments, they were all some kind of the building up of his mental strength, right? So he starts first with the forceful control of mind, where he does such strong attempt in controlling his mind. Like there is a description which says, as per the discourses, that sweat used to come out of his body, where he was trying so forcefully to control his mind and his thought process. After doing that attempt for a period of time, he realized that he is able to control his mind only for a temporary, for a period of time. So for him, that period of time could be even days, like a couple of days he was able to control. But after that, it again went back to the flow of thoughts and thinking through various things and that kind of a mode. So now he realized that due to the conditioned and not self nature of the mind, it is not possible to control it completely by sheer willpower. How much ever he tried, after a period of time, it kept going through in its own pace, in its own flow. So now he realized this practice is not helping him much. So he thought, okay, I will try one more practice, which is breath control. So he thought, okay, there is some connection between mind and breath. So rather than just focusing on the mind, I will also focus on breath. So what he does is he starts going through the extreme measure of some breath control. For example, it's in the discourses, as per the early Buddhism discourses, he attempts to practice breath by clenching his teeth and pressing his tongue against the roof of the mouth and sit so still. And the way he was sitting and practicing for such long period of time, the animals and some of the so-called devas, the spiritual beings who watched him, they felt that he must be dead. So he used to sit with such strong determination for such long period, and he also appeared as if he is not breathing only for such a long period of time. And he goes to such extreme measure. And even with that, he realized it's only causing a lot of pain to his body. And nothing still really is getting that sense of the answer or a solution to the Nibbana. Right? So he realizes after attempting this practice for a period of time is again not very helpful. So now, one point to keep in mind here, this is a side note which I created. After he awakens, the Buddha actually kept going on solitary retreats of like 1 to 2 months, where he was more or less pretty much alone. Okay, and there was only somebody to just give him some food, but absolutely no disturbance whatsoever. And food is basically one time a day, or maybe even one time in a couple of days, kind of thing. That kind of a solitary retreat. And sometimes not even anybody, he just ate something in forest whenever he felt hunger. And he used to go on such solitary retreats frequently, actually, even after getting awakened. And his practice in such retreats is primarily focused on mindfulness of natural breathing. So this is a key point to remember. So Buddha, throughout his 45 plus years of awakened state human existence, kept practicing this breathing meditation. That too specifically natural breathing meditation, no forced steps in the breathing, which is in the Buddhism world called as Anapanasati meditation. It has about 16 steps, and I have captured that for our reference in my key reflection points, which I will walk you through, folks, in specific little later. But in this 16 steps of mindful breathing, what they are is kind of captured, and there is enough material that explains this also if you want to go deeper. Okay, so now having said that, let's continue a little further. So key point here is he attempted first control of the mind, next breath, and still found he is not, they are not helping. They are not helping him to achieve his the goal of awakening. So now he then finally decides this much of pain is not enough. I should take more pain, and he decides to go on fasting this time. So that's the third step. And when he decides to go on fasting, he goes to such an extent in his fasting that his body becomes completely emaciated. completely loses out more or less all the flesh and all the fat completely, and it becomes so delicate that it's also stated in his own discourses that when he felt, he stood up and walked, but he actually had just fallen down wherever he was. He had become so weak and delusional, and his body was in so much continuous pain. And he realized this fasting, the extreme measure that he had taken, again is not helping him. And then finally, after attempting all these three, he decides to give up these practices. And there is also something interesting. When he starts this asceticism practices, he used to have some 5 more people as his fellow practitioners, who happened to be his co-students with earlier teacher, that is Uddaka, primarily. And when all of them realized Buddha overtook Uddaka himself in achieving whatever Uddaka was teaching, and when he decides to move with asceticism, they also accompany him. And they also were practicing in parallel to Buddha these asceticism practices. But when Buddha, or when Gautama decides to give up fasting, that kind of puts them off. They start thinking, now Gautama is no longer serious about his quest, and he is giving up, and he is going back to the journey of all the comfortness, and they decide to part with him and go on their own path to figure out the solution or the answer to reaching Nibbana state or the Nirvana state. So now, at that point is where the beauty of Gautama in terms of going towards awakening path happens to him, but unfortunately his friends go in some other direction there. Okay, so now let me pause a bit. Any questions about or any thoughts about his experiments? Anyone would like to comment or share any thoughts about his 3 experiments?
Hi Manju, this is Atresh here. Just had a clarification more than a question. I mean, not a question. See, when we really look at what we learned through Bhagavad Gita and all of that, right? Which talks about Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, where indulging and also taking one's responsibilities into consideration and doing all of that, and with the proper mindset and things, when things could be attained, awakening of mind can be attained, and all of that we went through. Doesn't this, I mean, at least I was finding it difficult to relate that, awakening can happen only with pain. And why is all this asceticism associated with pain? What is, I mean, if somebody commits to this, there is no pain, right? I mean, you're really going through that with willingness. Pain comes when there is resistance to one's thoughts or one's goals, right? I mean, that's what I was thinking. So, any thoughts on that? Anyone?
See, actually, yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Ravi. Go ahead.
So what I felt is, see, you said right, resistance to what is happening. Suppose you go through fasting, and if you resist it, it is painful. If you don't resist it, it is not painful, is what you said.
Exactly.
Buddha came to that itself, okay, saying that you resist anything is painful. So what his entire preaching was, be aware, accept it. Okay, that's what finally came to. Instead of rejecting the current state and going through fasting and accepting fasting, if you accept the current state itself as it is and be a witness to it, it's gone. So the whole idea of you wanting to change the current state and going through another painful state is same as the current state, is what I felt his thought was. It's just a wild guess.
Yeah, and I think and that's a nice comment as well, Ravi. And my interpretation of this is, see, for even Gautama, when he was Gautama and later when he became the Buddha, he experienced pain and comfort. But the point is whether he reacted to it. Because just because he became Buddha doesn't mean when, let's say, he ate a poison, he did not suffer, he did not feel the pain. He experienced pain. But he had a control, or he had a way of observing just and not reacting to it, right? So his suffering was not there. So he did not suffer. Uh, even after becoming awakened. But here he was not yet awakened, and he attempted such strong, extreme steps to see whether that pain helps him to reach the quest. And he figured out, even though he could, let's say, control his breath for a few hours, or he could, let's say, fast for so many days and take his body pain completely, not even react to it. He could detach himself from the pain and just observe. Still, it did not help him. As Ravi said, he realized those extreme states are not helping is the conclusion he came to with his own experiences. So that is what prompted him to give up those extreme steps. And finally, come back to what the whole crux of Satipatthana is, which is middle path, or his whole teaching. The whole teaching of Buddha is the middle path. He comes to that after attempting these three stuff. Atresh. So, and again, at least in Analayo's book, there was no mention, but at least in somewhere else, whatever I had read, during his childhood, he was taught in the Vedas. He was actually pretty good with respect to all the four Vedas. And that means he probably had a very good insight into the core teachings of Vedas. And perhaps, I don't know whether Bhagavad Gita was used in those days, but at least I'm guessing he had some knowledge about all the core teachings from Hinduism. And he probably used that to have the living of a moral conduct in his own way. But later, when he embarked on this, he felt there was some gap in the earlier teaching and he wanted to achieve it through his own experiences. And that is what put him on this journey here.
Thank you, Manju. Just one last clarification.
Yeah.
See, he went through this journey and realized something, but does he prescribe that anybody who is going in this path should also undergo that pain? And I mean, at least that doesn't make sense. So that is one thing. I mean, after I mean, he has prescribed some eightfold path and all that, right?
Right.
In that, there is no mention of this pain as a path for discovery, right? I mean,
no, absolutely no. Correct. In fact, this summary what I've created, there is color coding which I've used to indicate. So for me, the interest was not just Buddha's teaching. For me, the interest was the journey he took to reach awakening state. So this is where, if you see the flow picture that I've created, there is these arrows which are green, and there are these arrows which are red. All the red points, be it the box or the arrow, is something that he tried and realized they are not helpful. In other words, those were his failed attempts, and they were all excluded from his teaching later. And the green path.
Yeah.
So this
makes
green
a lot
arrow
of sense. Thank you. Thanks, Ravi and Manju. It helps.
Yeah, sure. And the green path summary is what you should we should use. And what I've done is, wherever these blue boxes you see in different shapes, those were some of the key points. Either he realized then and there as part of this journey at that step, or after becoming Buddha, he shared people to keep in mind as the kind of the milestones one should watch as one goes through these steps. So, for example, if I am going through this journey, the path or the important steps that Buddha took or Gautama took. Let's say if I am using moral conduct as my basis for my journey in the spirituality, I should make it on the basis of Shila, right? And then if I am going through, let's say, meditation, if I'm attempting to develop my concentration, I should know that I need to overcome these obstructions or unwholesome thoughts. So there are 9 of these obstructions that I should watch. And same way, anyone who looks to practice meditation would end up attempting to overcome. So things like doubt with respect to our own style of practice, attention or the lack of attention, is another thing that we will experience. This dullness or lethargy is something again we will have to overcome. Fear, elation, inertia, excess of energy, lack of energy, perception of diversity are few things that we might have to overcome in our own meditation practices. Okay, and and he clearly gives out when one is looking to develop concentration. Yeah.
You said some perception of diversity. What is that?
So that different beings and there is this various differences in what is that in our existence.
Oh, okay. We are individual. That's what.
Correct. We are individuals.
Oh,
correct.
Fine. I got it.
Yeah.
Hey, sorry, Ravi. No, you said we are individuals, right? The whole concept is to get away from that and really think it is not. I mean, we are not individuals. We are a speck in the broader spectrum of things, right? So, yeah.
Correct.
So, how does that ninth point come as a learning, Manju? I mean,
No.
just
because
it seemed a little contradictory.
No, it's not a learning. It is, yeah, exactly. We need to get rid of it.
Okay.
So all these 9 points we need to get rid of. These are all obstructions. These thoughts or these aspects will stop us from strengthening the concentration or meditation practices. So if we want to reach this the highest level of concentration or meditation, no. So in fact, in the Buddhism, as per Buddha, there are 3 levels of concentration. One needs to go stepwise, and to reach this third level, the highest level, one needs to overcome these obstructions.
Oh, makes
They act as barriers.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it explains. Thanks.
So that means
Manju.
if, yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, there was a question.
Manju, Rajiv here.
Yeah, yes, Rajiv.
So the 3 points that we saw now, the forceful control of mind, breath, and fasting, right?
Yeah.
So which you said is a detour which Buddha followed. So in a way, it tells us that the craving for anything, even be it for spirituality or highest attainment, the craving for anything is not going to take anywhere. The culprit here is the craving, is what I understand, right? So the moment the craving is gone, so whatever remains is a pure awareness.
You are right.
So that is what. Yeah.
Anything that we strong. Okay, so if you really see, when one starts on the spiritual path, if you are in such a big hurry that I really want to achieve something and I really want to achieve something, and if you try to go that way, you will actually most likely end up slowing yourself down. So which is what one of the obstructions which is called out excess of energy here. So now if you are going very slow, that is, I will do when the time permits, slowly, then you are probably going through another obstruction, lack of energy or even dullness of your whole exercise. So this is where neither too much nor too less is going to help you. And you rightly called out, and Buddha, or in fact Gautama, realized that I need to eat, but I can't indulge. I need to breathe, but breathing too slowly or too fast is not going to help. That is why he started focusing on natural breath as the natural phenomena happens. Exactly. And he also realized I need to control mind, but I can't force it. I need to observe it. Or some of the realizations he started teaching later.
Yeah. See, some experience.
Yeah.
Go on.
No.
Just
Rajiv,
one
you
point.
Want to...
Yeah, just one point. Some experience in this aspect is, for example, we would be desiring something, right? And moment I get that what I desire, right? For that moment, everything seems to be so clear, so calm, right? Because I achieved something, my mind becomes almost very clear. So what I experienced at that point of time is not because I achieved something; it is because the mind probably was not having any thoughts at that point of time. It was like there was no craving in the mind. That is where the stillness came in.
Correct.
But of course, after some time, it goes off,
Correct.
isn't it? So which means
Correct.
that the natural state, what you were mentioning,
Yeah.
if we were in that natural state, then it implies that yes, that there is no thoughts in the mind, there is no resistance, and therefore we are with the natural flow. And
Correct.
that's all is what is a summary is what I could get out of this slide.
Right, Rajiv. Yeah, natural flow. That is the key thing. So that is where later we will come. There are some more things that Buddha, at least the Gautama, ended up realizing. And finally, the awakening state or the daily life or what is called as the holy life is all about being in that natural state in everything that we do, every single moment. But yeah, but before we go there, probably what is of interest is intellectually we can understand that concept, but being able to practice it, being able to be in that state is not easy. Actually, it requires a lot of practice. In fact, it requires a lot of what you probably think as am I not going away from trying to be in the natural state kind of practices, which is the essence of this whole journey from Gautama to Buddha. So going through to reach that state, there are few things that he ended up doing. No, so there are lessons for us. So that just like any competency that you want to develop, you need to practice and practice and practice is something that we will realize even in his journey. And later, for all the monks who were attached to him during his lifetime, he kept asking them to go into such kind of long duration practice sessions, meditation sessions, either on by themselves or in a group as well. So, but that is of later interest. But let us come back to where we are at this point in time, so that there are some guide points that we can keep in mind as well. But before we go forward, Ravi, you wanted to say something more?
Yeah, what I wanted to say was, see, Rajiv, you said, right, well, we are in some distress or something and we want to go to the pure state. See, the problem with that is we identify ourselves. See, we think we exist. Okay, there is a permanent entity that exists, and that is the person who is trying for futuristic bliss. Okay, that is the problem. The first problem is imposing a self, having an illusion of self, saying that I exist, I as a separate entity exist, and I practice, and I become blissful one day. Is the fundamental problem, and that is the problem we are facing everywhere, right? Whatever, even in the materialistic world, even that state of illusion or state of distress is also not me. See, the whole idea, the whole illusion is identifying myself with thoughts, identifying myself with emotions, okay, identifying myself with the body is the fundamental thing. And if you get rid of it, all those exist as it is, right? The body will exist, the mind will exist, the emotion will exist, but you, I mean, there's some detachment. I don't even call you, but there is a detachment from that, and you see everything, and there is a constant flow of say what I call wisdom, which says it's just a witnessing. I'm witnessing this. The way I see the outside tree, I see my thought. The way I see a outside tree, I see my emotion. Then there's no you there, or there is no attachment to it. Who is trying to change? And that's what I think. See, with strong practices like fasting, all those things, actually you are strengthening that self and projecting that self even more strongly. Okay, that's what I think Buddha tried to kill. And if you hear Jiddu Krishnamurti preaching, who preaches mostly the Satipatthana, he kept on telling he is against yoga, he is against pranayama, he is against all these practices. The only reason is, even in that path, you are strengthening the ego, saying that I exist, I do pranayama, I do fasting, and one day I will be happy. This itself is the problem. So that's what finally Buddha concluded through all this thing, is what my understanding of that is.
Yeah, I get that, Ravi. In fact, in fact, associating ourselves or myself in the spiritual plane is far more dangerous than associating myself in the materialistic plane, because we feel that in spiritual we're at a higher plane.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, what you just now told, no, Rajiv, is also one of the hindrances to watch out. Is something that has come out explicitly in Buddha's discourses to his disciples. That when they start, let's say, attaining some of these levels of concentration, and there is something called as attainments, or the absorption attainments. We will talk about that. There are 4 of them. So when somebody is practicing Satipatthana, and when they start reaching the next level after next level, there comes a state where you feel, if I am not in this state, I am not doing something right. And there again, Buddha explicitly calls out, don't attach yourself even to that state of awareness, awakened state, or whatever, the elatedness state. You need to overcome that also, is something that he calls out. And that is why you also see as one of the obstructions, elation here.
Elation, yeah.
Yeah. So that comes to it. But then see again, what Ravi is saying, or what Jiddu told, no, it is that final state. But to reach that is not something that will happen just like this for most of us. At least if we look at closely Gautama's life itself, no. And when I say Gautama's life, it is not just the current life of the Buddha as Gautama, but all the previous lives. Because as Gautama himself called out in the Jataka stories, when he achieved those higher knowledges, he actually goes back to almost 91 eons of his past lives. Eon is a very long period of time, something like hundreds of years. And as per the Buddhist literature, eon also is a period of time which you can imagine something like this. You take a piece of cloth, take a mountain, and use this cloth to hit it, to make that mountain to pieces. Okay, and to keep hitting with that cloth. How much time it takes to bring down the mountain with that cloth? Hundreds of years, potentially, right? And that period of time is called as one eon in Buddhism literature. And as per Buddha's own discourses, just before his moment of awakening, he actually sees all his past lives, not just his past lives, but also others, but primarily his past lives, where he undergoes some thousands of lives, living and learning various things in this spiritual path, whatever he teaches here, no, to a certain extent. And that journey across multiple lifetimes helps him to realize the key point, which is everything is impermanent and everything is flowing as is. Nature exists. That's it. So that realization comes to him when he looks at all his past lives. It is, at least from Buddha's viewpoint, it is not some kind of a superpower that he got. Rather, that helped him to realize and bring in his Satipatthana the core teaching of impermanence. When he saw across so many lives, nothing really he could attach to, body, thoughts, or whatever, and everything kept happening as is. So that point also comes in. But then I mean, as we discussed in the last session also, if we are interested, we can do some specific takeaways on the Jataka tales in another session. What were some of the lives that Gautama had lived before, and what was he able to achieve in those lives, which kind of kept accumulating for him to realize the cycle of karma. So in Buddhism, karma, past lives, or the reincarnation, they are all interlinked to realize the impermanence of nature and appreciate that there is nothing that you can hold on to, be it body, mind, soul. There is nothing that you could hold on to, because as Gautama saw, even in spite of going back to 91 eons, thousands of lives, he could only go up to the level of consciousness, and he could not see anything beyond that. There was no self that he could discover, in spite of going back to so much period. And that is why he also came to that second aspect of no self or anatta realization as well. We will come to that maybe a little later. At least let's see the journey he took and some of the paths, because ultimately, yeah, it is okay to understand the core teachings, but we should also understand the steps behind it. So this is where I felt a bit more interested in understanding the kind of journey we might end up taking when we are practicing the path of meditation or the path of Satipatthana. So that's where my interest was, and some of the thoughts what I summed up here as well. Okay, so before I go forward, any comment or a question by anyone? Okay, so if this made sense, the key point here is when we are looking to develop concentration, Gautama also went through these 3 levels of concentration to incrementally develop. Okay, just like Agile guys, we believe in incremental delivery. He also got this incremental levels being achieved. So I found this is very interesting because in my own practice, I am going through these steps. I could realize that I'm going through these steps. So the 3 levels of concentration, the way Gautama realized and the Buddhism explains is when we are looking to meditate, when we are looking to concentrate, so there is this awareness and there is this contemplation, right? So typically you start contemplating about something. So it could be an object, it could be a thought, it could even be this nirvana itself as your thought or the contemplation object, right? And there is an awareness that you keep directing to stay here or keep flowing, right? So these 3 levels is kind of explained where in the level 1, you need to direct your awareness so that you can sustain the contemplation object for a period of time. And in the second level of concentration, you can do away without having to direct your awareness. And you may have to still sustain your contemplation. And in the third level of concentration, it just becomes smooth flow. There is no need to be explicitly aware. There is no need to try attempting to sustain the whatever you are contemplating with some energy or force. It just keeps happening smoothly. Something like moving from in the first gear of a car, when you are driving a car, when you are looking at going from first gear to fifth gear. So in the first gear, there are many parts of the car that need to undergo a lot more stress and lot more directed flow of energy, right? And you also as a driver need to be a bit more focused. And as you go from first gear to second gear to third gear to fifth gear, the car starts moving more smoothly, right? And it kind of runs on its own for a much longer period without you having to exert any specific direction or a guidance as such, right? So this concentration levels also, it appears to be very similar to me. Even in my own journey, even in my own practice, that's what I'm going through as the experience. And there is a correlation to absorption levels, which we will come to next when he takes some subsequent steps here. Okay, so now coming to the next point, which is, see, after these asceticism practices, he realizes that we should do, I mean, in addition to doing away with that pain, so he realizes he needs to do things in moderation. So this is where he also kind of there is one additional point here in terms of this mindful eating. So he talks about, or at least in later after he becomes Buddha, he talks about that if we want to have a smoother flow of our concentration, we should practice mindful eating so that we reduce excessive intake of food and make body at ease while eating and also later, right? And the more we understand food, the more capable we become of removing our cravings for the sensual pleasures, because food happens to be one of the primary sensual pleasure that all of us will experience day in and day out at all stages of our life. So this mindful eating as a practice is something that Buddhism teaches for all its practitioners. And another thing which is explicitly called out, in fact, Gautama, of course, after becoming Buddha, and later he kept teaching to abandon eating at night, especially. So, and that also helps the body to actually, unless you have some specific diseases. So otherwise, for most of us, eating during the day is much better than eating in the night. So therefore, at least in Buddhism, and Buddha explicitly calls out, eat 1 or twice 2 meals a day, and preferably before the sun starts going down. So that means something like 12:31. Beyond that, there is no need to eat is something what I think there is a call out from Buddha and many teachers in Buddhism. I have not done much more research to understand and go deeper, but at least for me, that practice, when I experienced myself, I found it very good for a couple of things. One, sleep was much lighter, and when I woke up in the morning, body was much lighter. And when I attempt doing the meditation, it's much easier to go through the levels of concentration and have a much more calm mind, is what I experienced personally. Okay, so now having shared that, okay, we are going to hit 7:29. So, and we just came back along with Gautama to the main part, which is he decided he's going to give up the painful practices and rather focus on this primary question. He realizes, why should I be afraid of happiness? And if that happiness is, let's say, coming from wholesome states, why shouldn't I have that? Is a realization he comes to, and he decides that he will watch his sensuality and he will watch his unwholesome states of mind, but he will no longer subject going through extreme measures. And with that as a thought, he strongly determines he will adopt kind of a middle path of whatever is taught in the Satipatthana meditation, right? With respect to body, feelings, mind, primarily at least, and even to some extent Dhammas, and he decides to practice them with a balanced state of body mind as such. And this is where he practices it for a period of time, and then as he continues practicing, he ends up getting 3 higher knowledges one by one, and he also ends up going through some 4 levels of absorption states as part of his practice, which is what I think we can discuss as part of our next week's summary. Okay, so for today, let me pause. Any further comments, questions before we do anything else?
I have one question, Manju.
Yeah.
These blue ones, what you have written, for example, in the natural breathing. Here, right hand side down. Yeah, natural breathing, these things. So after forcefully he was doing few things like breathing, and he was doing that fasting, and he was doing that stopping the thoughts and all these things. So during that time he didn't realize this, right? He realized only later. So why you kept that in your flow? You kept there.
Yeah, see, there is a combination of some of these things he realized then and there, but some of it he taught later. He might not have realized immediately, but as, let's say, if I am going to apply the same technique to walk towards the awakening state, no, most likely I should experience this alongside this specific path or the stage in this journey, is what my understanding is. So, for example, this mindful eating, no, if I take, no, so initially when I'm just leading a normal life, and even though I'm strongly determined, I might be leading a life of moral conduct, but I might not have realized I should give up eating so much yet, right? And when I start practicing meditation, when my concentration levels start going up, then I might do some experiments around food to see when I eat more, am I able to reach this highest level of the 3rd level of concentration faster, or when I eat less, do I reach this highest level of concentration? Is something I did myself.
Okay.
Right? So my realization was, I came to this conclusion after attempting few things, and I felt I should put it as a point for me, as well as maybe if somebody is attempting to keep this, that you are also likely to realize this somewhere around here in your journey.
Right. Yeah. Got you. My second question is, these his gurus, Ramaputta and Alaya, these guys, Alara Kalama,
Yeah.
they look like they are from Sri Lanka, right? Is there any relation, Buddha and Sri Lanka?
No, these teachers were pretty much in the northern part of India.
Oh,
In
is
fact,
it?
yeah. So, yeah. In fact, they are not really Sri Lankans as such. It's all that not the yeah. It's basically the North India region where Buddha was primarily, or Gautama was primarily located. All this Shravasti and other places, Patna and surrounding states. In the today's times.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Samba, I think this is 3000 BC, right? Or 1500 BC? Buddha was.
2500, 2600
500 BC, I think.
500 BC, yeah, rather, yeah.
500 BC. Okay. So that time, I think Sri Lanka still was not a Buddhist country.
Correct.
Correct. It cannot be before
Ashoka
Buddha.
was the one who probably.
Yeah.
It cannot be before Buddha.
Yeah.
Correct.
Ashoka was the one who got Buddhism to Sri Lanka, right? That's what history says, at least.
Yeah. Sri Lanka or India? Because, okay. So he spread it through
Asia.
Southeast Asia. Okay, got it.
Manju, I have a question. This controlling breathing.
Yeah.
What is the logic behind it? And multiple thoughts talk about it. Breathe control, how does this change anything?
So, in fact, from Buddha's realization, the best way of meditating is not to attempt controlling breath at all. In fact, the breath should be allowed to flow naturally. And that is why there is this concept of mindful breathing, which is explicitly emphasized as one of the core practices for all the people following Buddha's teachings. And this has some 16 steps clearly called out. That is, don't try to breathe heavily, don't try to breathe shallowly. Rather, let the breath to happen naturally. And as it happens, just focus on these 16 aspects, which is nothing but satipatthana, to be honest, actually. You should just observe your breath as it naturally flows. So at least in some of the other thinking, so there is a relationship between breath and mind, and therefore some of the meditation teachers ask you to, let's say, breath is also sometimes called as the bridge between body and mind, right? So in some of the meditation techniques, you are asked to actually take some deep breaths initially to put your body and mind at kind of a ease state, and then go into the natural flow. So, but the key point here is, I think Ravi also probably discussed this when we were talking Satipatthana. So breathe, you would see, is one natural phenomenon that keeps happening for us, both at physically noticeable level and at the mind level. Whereas some of the things are primarily either physical or mental, whereas breath is one aspect of our body or one aspect of our nature, which is very visibly linked to both. So if you are, for example, if you take 100 steps to run, breathing becomes faster and deeper, right? If you run, if you jog, and if we sit at one place and take some few deep breaths and then notice ourselves, the mind tends to calm down a bit. So you can see the relation between breath, body, and mind in your breathing practices. And that's why this breathing is considered as so important across many meditation techniques. So, and that is my understanding. Anyone else would like to add anything further?
My
The way I understand.
Even psychological.
Go ahead, please.
No, go ahead.
No, I was saying, in order to control the mind, there are many techniques, and breathing is one of the techniques. And breathing is easy because we can observe it very this one. And it's easy for us to relate between our breathing and our mind and get a better control on the mind. So that is what I was net. That is what I understood with what Manju said now.
Vijay, is it not that because we can't stop our thoughts, so shifting our focus to breathing?
Yeah, that's what we are saying. Yeah, correct. In order to get a better hold of yourself, you need to control your mind. In order to control your mind, you need to observe something. So the breathing is the easiest way because it is a natural process and it's a continuous process. So the more you observe, the you can stretch it to any long time because for your lifetime, your breath is with you.
Yeah.
That way. Yeah, Rajiv, you were saying so.
Okay. So
Vinay, were you saying something? You were on mute or something. We could not hear you.
No. I was listening to all of you. I'm waiting for Rajiv to complete what he wanted to.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I think, yeah, Manju told that even the psychological emotions and the breathing are related. I mean, if most of us would have observed that as well. And one thing which I observed was the breathing in the kids and breathing in the adults. I don't know how many of you would have observed that. Um, so the depth of breathing in the kids, if you can observe, which is what Manju called natural breathing, because they are very close to a natural state than us. So you will find a difference. So somewhere I still not able to 100% figure out what is the connection, but there is a difference between the way kids breathe and adults breathe in different states. Probably psychological emotions affects breathing. If you're anger, you're definitely your breathing would increase. If you're happy, your breathing would increase. If you're probably not emotional, your breathing would be different states. So there is a relation between how your body reacts with how you're with your state of mind. Um, and then if you observe the child breathe during its sleep, you will find at least the breath that it takes goes up to, it goes deep down towards this position of navel. So we can also see if when we inhale and exhale every time, does our breath goes up to that point of navel. So when I tried that particular thing, when taking breathe deep up to the navel and then inhaling and exhaling, there was a little difference in the way the mind worked. So in that sense, I wanted to, there's some correlation is what I wanted to say.
good point.
Yep. Thanks all for sharing. In fact, I was curious to know the breath control because the word control intrigued me in terms of understanding what and how it will help, because managing the breath and controlling or taking deep breath, definitely it refreshes your mind, and there is a scientific logic also, because oxygen goes to your mind and that eases off a whole lot of tension. I've now tried doing a lot of times when you have headache or you are tense, take deep breath. Within like seconds, it vanishes. All the pain, everything goes off. But control is the word
Yeah.
which made me very curious that
Yeah.
how do things happen differently.
Yeah, Vinay, I think at least Gautama's attempt at breath control was extreme, going by the descriptions in the discourses later. Actually, the good thing about Analoyo is he doesn't use any other text other than the Pali or the Chinese or Sanskrit language, the early Buddhism discourses. And each discourse is something where Buddha would have shared his own experience, his own thoughts as part of those discourses, right? So, and there is a description of how you try to do this breath control as per Buddha himself. And he goes to some extreme measure of controlling the breath, of holding the breath completely, sitting completely still for very long period of time, very long period of time. And the description what I have captured here, no, with teeth clenched and tongue pressed against the roof of the mouth. with sweat pouring out from his body. He tries so many things. Poor guy. So and finally realizes none of that is really helping. It's interesting to see the way he attempts.
Yep. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
So at least for me, these are all things that one should not do. But also it also tells us that if I am trying out few things in my life, and if I'm failing in some of those attempts, I should be hopeful that I'm in the right track. I'm following in the footsteps of Buddha. It's a message at least I took in some of my experiences.
Yeah, it boils down to what is the intention. See, if intention is to be happy, there's a method to do it. Intention is to earn money, there's a method to do it. But Buddha's Satipatthana intention is not to gain any of these things. It is to realize the ultimate truth. For that, breath control is not going to help. Okay. But if suppose I'm sick and then I'm using breath control and getting out of that sickness, still possible. But is it to get out of sickness? Because what he said is, how much ever you get out of sickness, finally you end up dying sick. Okay, there is nothing like you get out of sickness forever. Similarly, get out of pain forever is impossible. But we are hopeful. Still, we hope that one day I'll get out of pain and I'll be healthy forever. Which knowingly we fall in that trap. That's a nature, by nature. So that's what he said. Satipatthana, he said, is a direct path to realization. But there are a lot of other intermediate paths for other means, like, okay, being calmful, getting out of anger for some time, and then getting out of fear for some time. All those things still works, and there are different paths for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the next session, we will focus specifically around the key things, what happened for him when he started taking the right steps, leading up to what he ended up experiencing in terms of the 3 higher knowledges, and what the summary insight he ended up getting. That also I have captured in those blue boxes for us to review in the next session. So at least in this session, we understood all his failed experiments, and we came back to the right track at the end of today's session. So from here, we will focus on what are the few things that we also hope to achieve if we follow in these steps.
Thank you, Manju, for putting
you.
it very neatly and in a structured way. Helps a lot, and thanks everyone for the session.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you, Manju. See you. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Have a nice weekend.